Roy, what a podcast we have for everyone today. That was a super inspirational podcast. Fastest hour we've ever done something with. Yeah, I mean, that was an amazing conversation. Anyone that's listening to this, watching this, please like this video, share it, subscribe to it. If you have anyone that is maybe struggling, maybe facing a little adversity right now, this is the best episode that we have to date that will help inspire you, hopefully. Our guest today was just a truly inspirational guy. So, Roy, why don't you let everyone know who we talked to, and let's just get right into it.
Yeah, today's guest was Chris Ruden. He is a amputee powerlifter, a speaker all over the country, and he was on the Titan Games all over the world. Oh, yeah, and Type 1 Diabetic. All in all, he was a very inspirational guest to have on. If you're going through a tough time, I know that quarantine is a rough time for everybody mentally, some more than others, or if you're having an issue with like coming out, being yourself, if you're battling with any of those things, I think what he gave on the podcast is worth listening to, and what he probably has even more to give is 10 times more valuable. So maybe somebody you want to reach out to, watch his videos and stuff like that. He was great.
Yeah, I hope you guys enjoy this one. Again, like, subscribe, share. Anything you can do to help us get this message out would be amazing. With that being said, let's go ahead and get into today's episode.
The Sweat Collective.
Making your bed will also reinforce the fact that the little things in life matter.
If you're going to get a new result, you're going to have to get new action.
You got to get out there and be like, oh, this hurts. This hurts real fucking bad. Start to learn the mind is powerful. It's powerful, man.
2, 1, go.
Awesome, man. Well, hey,
1 minute and 30 minutes, 30 seconds.
I know, right? Well, Chris, thanks again for coming. Before we get started, why don't you just give everyone a little bit of your background, kind of what you're about, and we'll just dive in, talk about it along the way.
Absolutely. I am probably the only disabled amputee pro powerlifter, motivational speaker, donut enthusiast, and recent star of Titan Games with Dwayne "The Rock" Johnson that you know. And if I'm not, please let me know, because I have to change my website and my email signature. So I was born with a disability. I was born with 2 fingers on my left hand and a shorter left arm, went through a lot of bullying and stuff, and hid my disability for 17 years. It took getting an autoimmune disease to kind of come out of that, and now I help people see their world without limits.
That's amazing, man. So that's actually really cool. Like, what was that experience like growing up? I mean, I'm sure it was hard as you were younger, but maybe it turned at a certain point.
For sure. Like, perspective changes throughout everything, and it's really easy to connect the dots going backwards. But growing up different, especially in like not the best area, you know, my parents never had money. So I was always the different kid, and I couldn't really not be different. You know, I thought I was okay until I would go to school, and people would constantly point out, make fun of me for something that I couldn't control. You know, it wasn't my choice to be born like that, and I couldn't do anything about it, but I blamed everyone. You know, I blamed my parents. I blamed myself. You know, I really thought that I was a monster, and that's how I was made to believe. So I went from, you know, being that kid with the disability, that broken kid, that weak, you know, like you think about synonyms for disabled, you hear things like weak, broken, useless, helpless. Like, can you imagine being labeled one of those just because of something that happened to you that's outside of your control?
Yeah.
You know, so for me, it was tough. And I developed this hardened personality, like, oh, that doesn't bother me, even though it did, you know, and then it finally got to the point where I started hiding my disability in my pocket. And for 4 years, I lived every day with my hand inside my pocket. I did not take it out, to the point where I would put my backpack on and I would put my hand in my pocket, and I would have to ask to go to the bathroom to take my hand out of my pocket, to take my backpack off, or else I'd keep my backpack on for the entire day. It was that bad. I ran the mile, the PE test, with my hand in my pocket. You know, I hid my hand in my pocket or under a glove for 17 years. And it wasn't until a year and a half ago, 2 years ago, that I finally stopped hiding my disability.
Wow. And did someone come into your life that kind of helped you change that perspective, or how did you kind of get into that?
There's definitely, I'm a big believer in like power of moments. And there was a lot of moments that built up to that, but I was the strongest like fighter to me accepting who I was and what I had, and that who I wasn't just what I had or didn't have, you know? Mm-hmm. So honestly, it was this prosthetic arm, believe it or not. So this prosthetic arm, getting this was the deciding factor. I set up a fake goal that I was like, if I ever got a prosthetic arm, I would stop hiding my disability. You know, I did all this crazy stuff, broke all these world records with powerlifting. I spoke on stages, still hiding my disability. But I set a goal for myself. I was like, if I ever got a cool prosthetic arm, I would take, my glove off. I would stop hiding my disability. Well, it's really hard to get prosthetics. And in the United States, people usually get denied. Almost always. Like, it's higher than like 80% of people getting denied for prosthetics, even though they need them. And this was about 150 grand total, this whole thing. Wow. So they're not quick to say, hey, yeah, you can have that.
Yeah.
After about 6 months of fighting for it, I got approved. And then I'm a jump in the deep end type person. So I made a video on YouTube showing that I was like coming out of the closet, so to speak, with my disability. And it went viral, dude. The video hit like 4 million views. Washington Post posted it. So let's talk about going from like a subtle, hey guys, this is me, and then it just everywhere, which really helped me, But looking back, I was super thankful. But it was definitely a scary time because even being a guy, having muscles, tattoos, and all these things, we still have mental health, and that's still a thing in our community. And we don't like to talk about it because vulnerability isn't cool or something, But that's just a false concept that we apply to who we are, and I experienced it, and now I try and help people not experience that.
That's amazing, man. That's really really inspiring. I think that's so. Like with that hand, do you how do you control it? Is it through?
So there's actually like there's myoelectric like metal pieces or plates that pick up signals on the top and bottom of my forearm. So I can go into like different gestures. I control the speed. I can do all kinds of stuff. So I can move single fingers and all that.
Can you give us the middle finger real fast?
I can give the middle finger. And I actually took that off because I was just randomly walking around in Walmart with the middle finger. And then when you speak to kids, like my full-time job is a speaker. If they see that, for one, they want to see it all the time. They think it's the coolest thing in the world. And then the parents are like, I'm like, oh, it's the hand. It's not me. I don't know what it's doing, But it's fun, man. Like I've learned to take what was the hardest thing in my life and now make it into the most beneficial thing of my life, just because I flipped my perspective of, oh, this sucks, this is terrible, I'm broken, to, oh, I have no choice, so I might as well use this to my advantage,
Yeah, I think it's a super powerful thing because there's a lot of people that do hide their insecurities, their, lack of a term, inabilities, and you're using that as a tool to kind of grow your own, life out of that. And like, and is that what you kind of like speak about? Is that you speak to younger kids, or who's your main demographic?
I speak all around. I speak on overcoming adversity, and then also diversity and inclusion, specifically like disability inclusion, because a lot of people don't know that disability is the largest minority in the world. 1 in 4 have some sort of disability, and disability does not discriminate. It doesn't care whether you're white, black, Asian, female, male, gay, straight, Christian, Muslim. Anyone can get it. So what I try to help people understand is that people with disabilities are not less than, they just adapt. And being adaptive is a huge benefit to companies, corporations, and associations, because I've spent my whole life trying to figure out how to adapt. Why wouldn't you want to use that skill in business? How to adapt, how to pivot, how to create a different culture that's not only inclusive, but there's equity and shows support for people. There's so many benefits to using different cultural perspectives from all across minorities, but those are really the concepts I speak to. I speak at schools. I'm also type 1 diabetic. I take insulin 4 to 12 times a day, and I require it to survive. So I have an autoimmune disease as well. But that was a big pivotal point, like you asked about moments, where I decided to start doing something with my health, which turned into powerlifting, turned into all these things. So a lot of technically bad had to happen for good to happen. But the way I look at it is there is no good or bad without us. Things just happen, and we decide to tell ourselves a story about what happened. We either say it was good or we say it was bad. Perfect example. Getting a flat tire is bad, right? It's terrible. It ruins your day. I'm going to say no, it doesn't, because when you see someone else getting a flat tire, it doesn't ruin your day. You don't even feel twice about it. It's not the action of a flat tire that you're sad about. It's the fact that it happened to you. Right. And it's the fact that we are selfish in a sense, where we that's okay. I'm not saying it's a bad thing, but when you start taking perspective of, hey, why don't I just look at it for what it is instead of what I'm telling myself what it is it really a day ruiner, or is it just a moment that you have to get over and then you keep going? Bad moments don't have to be bad days. Bad days don't have to be bad months. It's what we tell ourselves about what's happening that determines the severity, and that's how I live my life.
It's actually very interesting. Just looking back at like stupid little things that I think are a bad day, right? Like I wake up, now I'm in traffic. Like,
Yeah.
what are some things like that we can look at as far as mindset goes? Like, what are some different shifts that people can take on a daily basis to start kind of retracting those negative thoughts and turning them into something more positive?
I think the hardest part and the worst part for people, for me especially, is knowing that everything is your fault. More so than that. Maybe not your fault, but everything is your responsibility in two senses. One, you have a responsibility. You have an ability to respond to anything that happens to you in life. You might not be able to change a scenario, but you can always change how you respond. It's not my fault that I was born with a disability, but it is my responsibility to live my best life. It's my responsibility to not let what I think is good or bad affect the other person. That's my responsibility. Okay. And I can choose to have that responsibility. People will always say, oh, well, easier said than done. Absolutely. That's true. Everything is technically easier said than done, but it's also better done than said. Wouldn't you agree?
Yeah.
You know?
I agree.
Regardless of what's easier or not, that doesn't matter. You know, we have to start thinking in terms of what we can control. Stephen Covey, author of 7 Habits of Highly Effective People, he talks about the circle of concern versus the circle of influence. Basically, we have a massive circle of concern, all the things that could go wrong. What if I'm late? What if my life doesn't turn out the way I want it to? What happens if my girlfriend or boyfriend cheats on me? What if? All of these things we can't control. And then we have a tiny little circle of influence of things we can control. What can I do about this scenario? How can I choose to respond? What can I think, do, believe? What can I do? Okay? If you live outside of that circle of influence, you're living in a stressful state that you'll never have quality of life. Success, happiness, quality of life do not exist outside of your circle of influence at all. If you're constantly concerned about things you can't control, you're basically in the backseat of a car getting angry while you're not going where you want to go.
Wow.
That's a great topic considering like the moment that we're in right now. Like
None of us can control it.
Yeah. So much that we can't control. Like some people are stuck home, they're out of their jobs, they're out of money, but there's plenty that people can do, or they can just sit and wait.
You can, and either way, regardless of what you choose to do, you're entitled to your feelings. I'm not saying take feelings away. I'm saying control them. Learn to domesticate emotions that predict your demise. You know, if you are telling yourself a story about your life that predicts your own failure, you're a terrible director. You're an awful screenwriter. You know, you're literally causing yourself pain. You know, people are like, oh, well, I can't feel positive feelings or positive thoughts aren't going to help me in my situation because X, Y, and Z. You know, maybe you're right. Maybe positive emotions won't help you, but I promise you that negative emotions will hurt you. Positive might not help, but negative definitely won't.
Yeah.
When faced with the choice, why choose the definite negative when you could opt for the possible positive, you know?
Yeah, I mean, it's like a gamble, but it's a healthier, more positive gamble approach.
Let's talk about gambling or money. Everyone understands money. Would you invest in a stock that is failing, knowing that it's going to continue to fail?
No.
Right.
So why would you invest in a negative feeling, knowing that it's going to get you nowhere?
It's a good way to put it.
I don't understand. Also, let's talk about money. If you found a $20 bill on the ground and it was wrinkled and it was just crumpled up, would you still want that $20 bill?
Yes.
Of course.
Why? Because a $20 bill maintains its value, right? Regardless of what it's went through. So why don't we? Why is it that when something bad happens to us, we get crinkled or stepped on or folded up, that we think our value somehow decreases because of something that happened to us?
Mm-hmm.
When in reality, the only thing that happened was your value stayed the same if you choose it to be, or you decided to drop your value because of an external circumstance that you can't control. Should my value be less because of the way I was born? I don't believe so.
I don't either. I think that's very similar to like someone that is trying to follow some type of nutrition or fitness plan, and then they drop off of it for one day because of one bad either
100%.
eating or one bad training day. Like that same mindset applies to basically anything you do in life.
So I got my degree in exercise science, and I had a fitness business. I was actually Adapt Wellness or Adapt Fitness for 5 years, got up to a certain following on Instagram, and then rebranded to my own name. But I had clients all around the world. I've helped hundreds of people lose thousands of pounds. I just don't do that anymore. But in training people, nutrition and training, I would teach people, just because you have a flat tire doesn't mean you need to set the car on fire. You know, Just because you miss a meal or you go over your macros or you didn't do your cardio one day doesn't mean you need to beat yourself down in the ground.
Right.
You know, you don't need to make it worse, and you don't need to assign emotion to that. It happened. Great. Let's move forward from there, because anything beating emotion into what's already happened is concern. You're living in that circle of concern. You're concerned with something that you can't control, and that's not going to help you. The question is, what can you do with where you're at right now to do something good? And if you're faced with a choice of things you can do, ask yourself, what decision in that choice will you look back at and be most proud of? That will always help you make the right decision.
So how long ago have you been, so you've been weightlifting for a long time, right? Like,
Yeah, I've been weightlifting since I was diagnosed with diabetes at 19 years old.
and like obviously you've developed this entire mindset for a long period of time, but what did that do for you that kind of helped show you that you have the strength and the courage to be able to get into the position you are now, if at all?
Weightlifting taught me how to fail. Weightlifting taught me the difference between failing and failure. So failing happens every day. It's a verb. It's things we do. You know, you stub your toe, you fail. That's fine. Failure is a noun. It's an identity. It's becoming a whole persona. It's deciding that you are no longer good. Weightlifting taught me that it's okay to fail, but it's never okay to be a failure. I wanted to be a bodybuilder, but in bodybuilding, you have to be symmetrical. I'm not symmetrical. So I'm too stubborn. I'm too much of an asshole. Not sure if I can curse, but I did it anyways. Too much of that to really listen to people. So I decided to build muscle. I did everything I could, learn to adapt. I did pull-ups with my residual limb. You know, at that time I didn't design the hook that I now lift with, but I got into powerlifting because I found ways to lift. And I did my first powerlifting meet, and I won best lifter. You know, my squat was like 500. My deadlift was like, my squat was like 430. My deadlift was like 500, and bench was like 300. And fast forward to today, I've done 7 competitions. I've won 6 of the 7 competitions. I've pulled 655 pounds with technically one hand and a broken pancreas in front of 20,000 people at the Arnold Sports Festival. And I'm on track to hit 700 this year, you know? So it was hard in the beginning. It was, but I had to learn to adapt. I had to learn to fail, and I had to learn that every time I mess up, I'm just one step closer to success. So I don't take things personal anymore.
Yeah, I like that mindset too, because like weightlifting, very similar to, we had conversations with Jordan Syatt and some other people that talked about using jujitsu as a kind of way of developing a mindset of always progressing. Like, you know, same with weightlifting, like you'll never be, it's like not a destination. It's always like
there's no destination. You know, I always tried to set a number goal, but like 700 is the next number goal that I want. But from there, I'm gonna set a new goal. Maybe that's within powerlifting. Maybe it's not. Maybe I go to fighting. Maybe I go to whatever. I'm not like married to a concept of how my life should be. I never thought I would be here. You know, for multiple reasons. I never thought I would get through the depression. I never thought that I was gonna make it through those years where I didn't want to live here anymore. You know,
yeah.
I thought I was going to be a lawyer because I love arguing with people, and I majored in political science. You know,
yeah.
So many changes, man. I just stopped saying no to changes that make sense. And speaking now, I love it, dude. I've spoke all around the world, spoken at I think over 60 events over the last few years, and it's insane to be able to have that impact and to go from fitness to more mental health and still stay in the same realm. You know. So I love what I do. And I love that you guys give back in the sense of lifting weights is easy. You know, eating healthy is technically easy. You know what you need to do. You know what you don't. It's the tedious every single day tasks that you have to do that make it hard, the mental component. And it's the same thing with battling diabetes. It's the same thing with fitness, anything. You know, we all share the same struggle. Everyone understands struggle. So to give back takes a lot. Man, I appreciate what you guys do.
Yeah, no, thank you, man. I mean, your story is very inspiring, and it sounds like, and based on just what you were saying about like one video took you from point A to point B in your life, I feel like that was like a really fast shift. And like, was that a hard thing to deal with when you were finally like took a step back and you're like, wow, I just impacted this many people?
It was pretty nuts, man. Because I kind of started when Instagram was first around, you know, and I've been grinding away trying to build a business on social media. I've worked for myself for probably 4 years now, and it was tough, man. You know, I'm not getting naked for the gram. I'm not doing stuff like that. So I'm like, I'm really trying to give value and impact and maintain who I am as a person on social media, which is a whole nother topic, you know? But that video definitely helped. I'd already kind of established myself on Instagram, but the YouTube scene blew up, which opened doors for, you know, a crazy amount of press. And then getting on that TV show with The Rock, I never applied for that show. They reached out to me and I thought it was fake. I almost didn't call them back.
That's cool.
Yeah, I thought it was one of those, like, the prince from Nigeria left you a house, and I'm like, nah, man, this is a scam. You know, I competed against like 200,000 other applicants. They chose me. They brought me out there. We competed against another 100 athletes for over like a 12-day course. It was insane. I mean, 12-hour course. It was absolutely nuts. And I was like, there's no way I'm making it. I'm a powerlifter. I don't do that. You know, the longest cardio I do is like walking to the refrigerator. And out of those 100 people, they chose 32 guys. I made the cut, and I happened to get on all the banners and stuff with The Rock. And dude, I lost, but I got to share my message. And from that, like, the value and the messages I got from families and people who are struggling similarly, is unbeatable experience, you know?
Yeah. I mean, that's a very inspiring thing just by itself. Like, you're a yes man, you know, like, there's so many things that maybe wouldn't have happened the way they did if you didn't just say yes to anything.
Absolutely. I mean, like, removing fear from like what you're currently going through is the hardest part. One of my favorite authors, Ryan Holiday, he has a book called The Obstacle is the Way. And that's really, for me, my biggest problem is also my biggest, like, success. I had a funny talk I gave at a college. It was called How I Turned My Health Issues into Wealth Issues. And it's crazy because what really broke me as a kid makes sure I'm not broke anymore, you know?
Yeah.
It's absolutely nuts. Everything comes full circle if you choose it to. So I'm super fortunate to be here and to be able to do what I'm doing, and I'm just running that out.
Chris, so you were powerlifting and giving talks throughout this whole time when you were saying you're kind of like, you were still hiding your hand. Like, how are you capable of, like, still masking that part of yourself when you obviously have to be in front of everybody?
For sure. And that was a huge fear of mine. Almost stopped me from getting into motivational speaking and all that kind of speaking that I do. But I feel like it humanized me. You know, when you see someone on stage, you're like a kind of like authority, and you're like, okay, I have to listen to you. With that, I openly acknowledge that there's still demons that I'm fighting, and I'm giving advice through what I've gone through. Not that I'm perfect, but I'm still fighting them. You know, I would never stand up in front of people and say, I'm perfect, you need to be like me. It's more so like, here's what I've learned. I'm still fighting. I'm sure you're still fighting. Let's fight together. And I did that. But it got to the point where I started to accept where I was. I was almost in this purgatory of, like, it's not where I want to be, but it's not bad enough to change. So I'm just, like, coasting. And a lot of people live there, you know? And I'm super thankful that I set up these challenges to, like, get myself out of that. But I had such a strong personality that no one would question me. They'd see me hiding my hand and no one would ever say anything, you know? So when you know your friends, when you know they're struggling with some sort of insecurity or something like that, I personally would love if someone were to come up to me and they were like, hey man, I noticed you're really hiding and stuff. I just want to let you know you don't need to do that around me, you know? So that's a big piece of advice for kids and people growing up now. If you see people struggling, you don't have to call them out, but just show support for them, you know, make it known that you got their back.
That's a hard conversation to have, because, like, the other person, their ego may kick in immediately, and they may get defensive around it.
It's not yeah, for sure. And I probably would have been like that at like 14, 15. I definitely would have been like that. Yeah. But it's also how you communicate it. I've figured out, like, communication is massive, not just like with relationships, but friendships, business, anything like that. To get your point across, you have to be very careful. You know, you have to do it in a way that's not accusatory. You have to do it in a way that's not belittling. You have to do it in a way that doesn't make the person feel bad. If anything, good communication should always make the other person feel good.
Yeah.
Perfect example is there was a kid. So I was about to give a talk in Orlando, and this dad approached me right before we went on stage, and he's like, hey man, I'm sorry to hit you with this. I just don't know what to do. My son just told me that he wants to commit suicide because of his diabetes.
Wow.
And I'm like, damn, like, right before I'm about to go on stage. So, like, my talk shifted a lot, but I didn't talk about suicide. I talked about life. I didn't talk about death. I talked about life. And after I met the kid, and I didn't treat him like a kid who wants to kill himself. I treated him like his name. I treated it like who he was. I didn't treat him like he was sick or broken or how people used to treat me. I treated him like he was a real person. And we talked about what he wanted out of life, and I had to dig it out of him. And I was like, oh man, that's awesome. I'd love to like follow up with you and see how you're doing, you know? Didn't talk anything about the problem. A year later, he's still messaging me, showing me he's doing push-ups, building his body, taking care of his diabetes, and now he wants to volunteer as a peer support group.
Wow.
The same thing that was hurting him is now helping him, you know? And that's what I found is like with this communication, like you have to be real with yourself and you have to say like, can I do something about this? If I can, what can I do? And how can I communicate in a way that's not going to hurt the other person? Sometimes just showing that you're there for them and that you value them more than the things that bother them is the best thing you could do.
Yeah, I think that's really important too, because there are a lot of people, especially nowadays with younger kids, like they do approach it as they are different and they're trying to figure out how to make them more inclusive into society. You know, my day job, I work for a school district, and I see that the way that they approach situations, and I don't necessarily agree with it, because they do kind of like shelter them and put them in a box where they don't, they shouldn't be in a box. They should be inclusive in the entire system. So yeah,
I think inclusion is super weird, because true inclusion is not focusing on diversity or inclusion at all. You know,
Yes.
True inclusion is not segregating one bit. They're not. You shouldn't say, oh, we have people with disabilities here because we believe in inclusion. What you should say is we have people working here because that's what we do.
Yeah.
You don't need to be specific with the type of person. You don't have to say, oh, I have black friends. Like what does that mean? You get what I'm saying? But we do that a lot. We try to stipulate, we try to like qualify how inclusive we are. And companies do it all the time. They're super guilty of this. But diversity without inclusion is a scam.
Yeah.
It is, man. And
I remember coming out of like an interview, and in the interview it was going great, and they mentioned like, oh, it's, you know, it would be great to have you on the team considering we're working on a diversity and inclusion. And I was just like,
it feels weird, right?
I was like, yeah, you know what? I don't really want this anymore, because I don't think
they
really
made you feel like a checked box. They were like, "Ooh, this guy really, that's our checked box."
I'm like, are you gonna hire me because I'm, yeah, like you said, like, am I filling a box for you, or are you hiring me because
and that's not what it is. And that's where we have to really push for true inclusion in the school system, in the corporate system. There's a lot of buzzwords being thrown around, you know, and to truly attack this, instead of treating someone like they're different, they need to treat everyone like they're different.
Yeah.
That would solve the problem, because
everyone is different.
Exactly. Change the connotation of different. Change what that means to be different. You know, radical acceptance is a thing I think people really need to drastically apply in today's world, especially if you want to get into business, you know, and not radical acceptance to gain, but radical acceptance to be a human. You know, we need to humanize more business.
Yeah, I agree. Well, I think nowadays it's definitely on the upswing. You know, like I do see a lot more companies and people that are more, they take that approach, right? Like they don't really talk about. I mean, I'm sure at the higher levels, like the big companies, like they do probably check boxes, but I feel like any newer companies that are being made, they don't care about that. If you're good for the job, they're going to hire you without labeling you anything.
For sure, absolutely. And I work with a few really good companies that are 100% the embodiment of true inclusion. And I love those companies. Absolutely love them. There's some that need work, but as long as we still have people like us pushing that message, I mean, you just do your part. You can't change the world, but you can change at least one person's perspective, which in the long run will inevitably change the world, you know? So just try.
I think at the same point, when you're talking about that, like the first step is to always fix yourself, or at least work on yourself before you can start working with other people.
For sure.
So for you yourself, like you've taken what you've learned with yourself, and now you're helping others through your experiences. And I think that's the best way to go about it, instead of like pretending you're doing something. Like I can't relate to you, so I wouldn't be able to talk about that. But like I can talk about my own experiences and my own issues and use those to kind of connect with people that I feel might be able to, you know, go farther in their own lives.
So I'm starting a new program that I'm piloting right now. It's closed to the public, but just for future reference, I'm teaching people, like a speaker mentorship, teaching people how to use the art of communication to become a better speaker and have more impact. And something you touched on that I want to mention, everyone has the same story. And I'm going to use you two, for example. You two have the exact same story as me. And I know that sounds weird. You're like, no. I'm like, let me tell you why. You went through some shit, you got over some shit, and there's more shit coming.
Yep.
We all have the exact same story. The difference is in perspective and narrative. Okay? If you think your story is invaluable, you're correct. But if you also think your story is valuable, you're also correct. Your perspective of yourself, your journey, and what you can do to help people is there if you choose to find it, but it's also not there if you choose not to see it. If you turn a blind eye to your ability to impact people, that's on you. Like I said, that's your responsibility. And if you think just because you can't impact as many people as Steve Jobs, you shouldn't impact anyone, I could have been that one kid that you could have impacted.
100%.
I vow to be the person I never had growing up, and that's why I do what I do. And I choose to work around like-minded people.
See, that's the tricky part with me, is like, not me specifically, but the things that I see online, right? There are a lot of people that want to help impact lives, but you're talking about that one video you make could only impact one person, and that could have been you. When people now, you use social media to reach a broader audience, and if that message doesn't get out to hundreds of thousands of people, it kind of deflates that person trying to make an impact. And
I want to step in there real quick, because it doesn't deflate that person. They let them be deflated by it. So there's a difference between what happens to you and what you allow to happen to you. So that $20 bill thing, that $20 is $20 regardless. Let's change that $20 bill to that video you made. Whether it impacts one person or 20 million people, it did its job. That video maintained its value. Now, I understand wanting more reach. Absolutely. You can want more reach in appreciation of where you are now. That's fine. But a lot of people choose one or the other. They're like, if it doesn't have this, then I can't do that. That's called conditional happiness. I can only be happy if this happens. If I had just lost 20 pounds, I would be confident in my body. That's conditional. We need to have unconditional, Yeah. It has to be, even the self-love thing. You can be 400 pounds and love yourself. Absolutely. But you also have to work towards the betterment of yourself. Whether it's self-love, whether it's business, whether it's relationships, betterment of yourself always needs to happen. Be happy where you are, but also strive for what you want. Also strive for better in yourself, better yourself in all ways, And I feel like people feel like they have to choose between, but you're the only one giving yourself those options. If you give yourself an ultimatum, that's all you'll have.
Yeah. Well, yeah. I mean, that's the tricky part with social media now, is like, especially
metrics.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Roy and I do this for one sole purpose of just, if there's, like you said, one person that we talk with that can share one really good piece of information, we get it out there and it helps 1-2 people, great. Like, we're not looking at the masses. We're doing this because we enjoy talking to people like yourself that have really great stories, and we want to be able to share those stories with other people. And, the success for us, well, if it comes, it comes. If not, we're still enjoying what we're doing. So,
and that's the difference. Like, whether you guys got 10 million views on this video or 1, the video is still the same. That message is still there, So, like, to tell yourself you're worse or better of a person because of metrics is just such a false sense of security. It just kind of shows where we're at today. TikTok was very smart in what they did. They increased the viewership and the engagement. So people who think engagement is key, they see increased engagement. Everyone's like, yeah, I want to go here, But true value and impact goes beyond social media. Social media is nice, but that's one part of the equation. What else are you doing? What else do you offer? In 10 years, when these platforms aren't around or they're different, what are you going to do? For me, I'm that $20 bill. My value doesn't change because social media does.
Right.
Whether social media goes away or we develop new platforms, I can go talk to someone at the grocery store and still feel like I'm giving the same value than I would on a new social media platform. So if you tie yourself to influencer things, let's be real. Most influencers have zero influence.
Yeah. 100%.
Just because you call yourself an influencer doesn't mean you're influential. And perfect example of that is, tell an influencer you're not going to pay them and you're only going to give them a percentage of sales, and they'll never message you back again because they know they have no influence. They just want to get paid for the followers and likes. So as a business owner, I have a protein bar company called NRG Bites. We work with influencers, and I've seen from the other side of it. I was the influencer for a while, but now from the business perspective, I'm like, oh, that's why these influencers only want money up front, because they know they have no pull,
right.
And what that means is they got obsessed with metrics over impact.
Right. And most of those people have decreased their value for the higher number.
Yeah.
As opposed to the other way around.
They're chasing numbers instead of value, which
Right.
inevitably will hurt their business. You know, you have great numbers. We hired some big influencers and they got 0 sales. We hired some micro influencers, tons of sales.
Yeah.
Why is that? Because influence does not stick to a number of followers. It doesn't, you know?
Yep. And that's like the same thing when you listen to Gary Vee and he talks about like width over depth. Like
Yeah.
you can have 1,000 followers, but if 1,000 of those followers all buy $1 of your product,
Dude, I'd much rather that than a person with 500 million followers and no one buys. And then everyone in the comments just is trying to like do some nasty stuff, you know, with the person who posted a thoughty picture. Like that doesn't really help my brand, you know? So there's a lot of benefits over that, but
yeah, I mean, I think it's like tricky, especially just with kids, you know, like I always just think about like, I mean, I'm 30, so I'm not a kid, but I'm also not a older person, but you know, I see a lot of these kids that like they post things online that just obviously are they're wanting attention, right? Like they're looking for likes, they're filtering their photos, they're taking photos of their body just to get a reaction and get likes and things like that. And I'm trying to figure out how we can help them shift that mindset into being more valuable.
yeah, I mean, it's tough. It's reframing what success is. It's reframing what value is. And a lot of people wanted to become influencers. And I had so many people ask me, like, how do I become an influencer? I'm like, we have to be influential. Like, what do you mean? I'm like, well, what are you going to do? Like, well, I want to make videos and I want to get paid from making videos. I'm like, all right, what are the videos going to be about? They're like, oh, I haven't thought about that yet. I'm like, oh, so you want to hang out at the finish line without running the race.
Right. You don't want to do any of the work. You don't want to share any of the struggles. You want to
regardless of work, you know, even the work has to come for sure. The work has to happen, but like you have to have an idea at least. Yeah. Your idea can't be finishing the race. Your idea has to be, how am I going to run? You know, right. But people are using this fantasy, this Disneyfication of end stage success. You know, that's what they want. You know, man, I want to have the followers. I want to be like that. So what do? They replicate the people that are already there. It's just like in bodybuilding, you know, you can't do the pros workout or the pros supplement regimen or the pros nutrition and expect to be there where they're going to be. Right. They did all this other stuff to get up there, and you're just trying to do this when you skipped step 1 through 75. Right. You know, it just doesn't make sense. You know,
they're like, give me all the supplements.
Yeah, lots of supplements.
Yeah, I mean, that's like why the whole diet industry is just fucking out of their minds.
It is. Because it's quick fix, instant gratification for something that can't be instantly gratified. You know, there is nothing new in the state of metabolism or in the state of exercise. We still squat, lift, push, pull. Like you could go into fancy stuff like daily undulating periodization or any sort of like scheduled programming. But at the end of the day, progressive overload. At the end of the day, work. At the end of the day, diet. Those matter most. No ebook, no influencer, no secret course is going to get you there, you know?
Yeah, absolutely. So do you personally have any type of accountability coach or anything like that?
So I have a mentorship group that I'm in for like speaking and stuff because I'm constantly trying to like build. But now I don't really have like a specific coach. I have other friends who are in different businesses and we hold ourselves accountable. Having an accountability buddy is huge. They don't have to be a famous coach. You don't have to pay them $20,000. Have someone who's willing to text you and be like, hey, did you do that shit you needed to do? You know?
Yeah.
That's it. Like that. Tell them what you need to do this week. For one, you got to figure out what you need to do this week. Tell them what you need to do this week and have them message you and be like, did you do the shit you need to do? That's it. You know, it doesn't have to be complicated. You don't have to enroll in these crazy courses and stuff like that. You can if you want to, but at the end of the day, that crazy expensive course or that crazy expensive mentor is going to tell you to do the shit that you know you should have done last week.
Right.
Right.
It's not a secret. It's not, you know, like you probably have in your notes section like me, all the stuff you need to do.
Yep. And
you don't look at it and you just stop doing that and go back to your notes.
Yeah. Well, that's the thing, you know, it's like people that overcomplicate everything in their lives, whether it's diet, fitness, you know, business goals, whatever the hell it is, everything's overcomplicated because it can't be as simple as just doing the next task, working, doing the next task, working, adjusting.
Yeah, it's not easy, but it's simple. You know, it's hard because you have to do those tedious tasks. You have to do those daily rigorous things. And that's what people hate. The easy part is going to the gym and lifting the weights when you want to, especially on International Chest Day. You know, that's great. Everyone wants to get a little titty pump. But the hard part is going back home and tracking your macros or doing whatever diet you're supposed to do or whatever you believe, you know. That's the hard part, is the day in, day out decisions. And that's death by 1,000 pokes in the diabetes world, but death by 1,000 choices. Your business is succeeding or failing because of those little things you are or are not doing.
Yeah, absolutely.
Love that.
So just tell us a little bit about your diet. What does your daily nutrition look like? Do you follow a macro plan? Do you kind of just eat based on what you're doing that day?
So I am known as the donut guy in the diabetes space. I literally have a tattoo of a donut on my leg. I would show you, but it would be super weird right now. I followed macros for a long time. I follow a lot of prominent researchers like Lyle McDonald, Alan Aragon, Eric Helms, all those people. I love being up to date on like the newest information. What I found that works for me and a lot of my former clients was just relatively flexible dieting. And that can be anything from just general macro tracking to intermittent caloric restriction. We have like a diet day and then a rest day, or any sort of variation of those. Right now I'm in between programs, so to speak. So like I'm not cutting or bulking, or I'm not leading up to a competition right now. So I'm kind of like intuitive eating. Just, I call it that. It sounds fancy, but really like I'm just being lazy. I usually do macro tracking though. That's like my favorite thing. It helps with diabetes because I know exactly how many grams of carbs I'm eating, and it really helps me stay on track personally. I've seen the most success with that.
Yeah, with macros. Do you ever use like the RP diet app?
I've never used that.
No,
but I've heard good things from it.
Yeah, we just talked to him yesterday. He was an awesome guy.
That's really cool. I've seen some really good success with people on that program. My thing is like, with anything, I think you need something specific, like very specific. I'm not a big believer in universal fixes to individual problems, Yep. So where that comes into play, and I'm sure he does coaching as well, I think people benefit. There's a general amount of people that benefit from a general, recommendation.
Yeah.
And then from there, being more specific takes more specificity. You can't always say this equals that, because there's no absolutes aside from the only absolute being there's no absolutes.
Right.
Yeah, the templates are helpful, but they also have like the one-on-one coaching and stuff.
And that's where the huge benefit is. Like I could see that as a massive benefit, using that already successful program with a one-on-one. I'm sure that's amazing.
Yeah. So do you still have access to a gym right now, or what are you kind of doing as far as your workouts go?
I should technically say no, I have no access, but yeah, I've been working out. So I was preparing for a competition. It got canceled. So now I'm just trying to maintain some of that strength, but I just doubled 565 on squat. So I'm pretty happy with my numbers right now. I got some quarantine strength going on.
Yeah. Right. Great. Yeah. That's like my struggle right now. Is like, I only have access to a dumbbell. So I'm home doing body weight stuff with one 40-pound dumbbell and just trying to do whatever I can. So
I did one like influencer workout on my patio. And I was like, I can't do this, man. I'm not cut out for this. Yeah. Like I started doing some lunges with like one dumbbell and I'm like, oh man, I can't, I got to find a gym. So I found, if you try hard enough, there's some low key people,
Yeah, well, it's luckily for me, I do create a lot of content for gym owners. So the gym that I belong to, I do a lot of his content. So every once in a while, I'll just go to his gym and we'll just work out together.
That's
so
perfect.
He's actually diabetic as well, so he has a insulin pouch that he.
Oh no, that's awesome.
Yeah.
Where do you live?
I'm in New Jersey.
Okay, cool. That's sweet.
But yeah, he always talks about it, and he's the same way. He's like the super humble guy, and like has a different outlook. And I just love talking to people that have like these, these roadblocks, and they don't use them as kind of like things that deter them from doing what they want to do.
For sure.
I think it's a super powerful thing because there's so many people out there that use these as their crutch in life. And
I think people, it kills me because I experience these people all the time. You're like, yeah, you had a disability. Yeah, you have an autoimmune disease, but you don't have this. They always try and, because you're not them, you'll never understand. And what they don't get is that they're right. I will never understand. But what they also don't get is that doesn't matter.
Right.
Me understanding or not understanding is not going to affect your ability to do what you need to do.
Yeah.
If you place blame on other people, you'll always be out of control of your life. You'll never be in control, ever. And that's why I said early in this call, I believe it's our responsibility. I believe we're responsible for everything that happens in our life. Maybe not responsible for why it happens, but responsible for what we do about it.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more. Awesome. Let's I would love to just talk a little bit about like your experience with the whole like Titan games, because I think that's really awesome. Honestly, I personally haven't really watched the show too much, but like what is it like
It was
there?
great. I saw it.
You saw it?
You
So
killed it.
So it was The Rock's first like show that he's doing. He brought it on with NBC, and we filmed out in California. It was basically from the makers of American Ninja Warrior, but they wanted to add the element of strength and head to head at the same time. So they put a bunch of different obstacles and stuff, and it was insane, man. Like being in the behind the scenes and stuff. I got to see like how TV works, and that was funny but pretty interesting. Got to meet The Rock, and he's such a cool dude. Like I used to play with his action figures when I was a kid. You know, I loved wrestling, WWF, and just to be in that whole scenario and be recognized by him, you know, was surreal. I did my obstacle and I failed, but The Rock ended up coming down from where he was and like hugged me, and like it was super dope, such a cool experience. And it was just it's crazy to think back like that happened. You know, I had people sending me pictures from like different areas of the country and in Asia of a big billboard, and I'm on the billboard. I'm like, that is so crazy. That little kid who thought he would never make anything, you know, just it's crazy what can happen when you open your belief, not only about like the world, but about yourself and your potential.
What prompted you to like start this whole protein? So is it just protein bars, or do you have other lines?
No, it's just protein bars. It was started by another type 1, actually, a type 1 chef. And his name's Paul. He ended up meeting me at a diabetes event. We spoke together by random chance. We spoke together, and we were speaking on nutrition. He was the chef. I was the nutrition guy. And after, we're like, "Oh, dude, you're cool." He's like, "Dude, you're cool." I'm like, "All right, let's go to the gym. Let's bro it out." And from there, he's like, "Hey, man, I got this company that I'm doing, and I would love for you to come try the bars." I tried the bars, gave him some advice, and then from there, he was like, "I'd love to bring you on as a consultant." I'm like, "Cool, I'm down." And then from there, he's like, "I'd love to bring you on as marketing manager." I'm like, "Cool, I'm down." He's like, "I'd love for you to be a co-owner of the company." I'm like, "Cool, I'm down."
Wow.
So we're here, you know, and we've been doing great. We rebranded, and we're in the process of like bringing out a bunch of new flavors and stuff. It's incredible, dude. I absolutely love what we're doing, and it's so much fun to go from just being a service-based guy with fitness and speaking to actually having a product that people benefit from in both worlds. General quality of life is my thing. I want people to live a better quality of life. And that happens from a multifaceted approach of like mental health, fitness, nutrition. And that's just one more piece of the puzzle, man.
Yeah, absolutely. Do you set goals like every month, or like what is your like goal? Do you have like goals or what do you do like that?
Our goals every month are just service the customers we have. And we started with a lot of diabetes, you know, based people, type 1 diabetes. We ventured out. Now we're in so many different countries. We're seeking like distributorship in like some major retailers this year, but we're focusing on just online sales, and we're doing great, man. Like our goals are just keep going. We're trying to keep up with it. We're still in the small business side of things, so we don't have many employees, but it's growing like crazy, man. And it's so much fun. It's like a crazy ride, but it's nuts.
Yeah.
What is it about the bar that makes it like diabetic friendly?
So it's technically not for diabetes. But it is a low-carb, gluten-free bar. It's a smaller bar. So instead of a large protein bar, it's smaller. And what we figured is a lot of people, the general population, not the bodybuilders who eat the like massive bars, the general population will eat half a bar and they'll put the rest in their purse, or it'll melt, or they'll put it in their bag. They'll eat some of it, you know. We want a quick, convenient size. We want it to have lower carb, but also like natural ingredients, so you can pronounce every ingredient in the bar, which is nice. There's no like crazy, God knows what they put in it. And quick 10 grams of protein. So it's made by a chef as well. He's a type 1 chef, so it tastes good. We don't believe you have to sacrifice taste for health.
Yeah, I mean there are a lot of bars that I've tried that are pretty disgusting.
That taste like poison, honestly. They taste like poison, or they taste like packaging. And that was our thing, is like, how are we going to make this bar? I guess I could say this to really give you why we're doing this company. Our goal is to be the company that when you pick up one of our bars, you're picking up our bar instead of an Almond Joy or instead of a Snickers. If we can get a person to replace that one bad habit with a better habit, we're doing our job.
I was actually going back a little bit, because I was asking about goals, but I was more curious. That's awesome to talk about, but I was very curious about like your own goal process. Like, do you set goals every month? Like, do you set a schedule every day, or do you kind of like wake up and just go wherever the day takes you? Like,
I'm pretty intuitive with that. Like, I I'm not a very like Excel spreadsheet type person. I'm more of a creative design. So I have almost every night I write some goals in my notes section. And then I look at my notes section, but also I have the attention span of a butterfly. So I try and focus on whatever is pressing in my mind at that moment. But I've gotten a lot better at organizing my thoughts down to priorities. And that for me has been the biggest thing is like, okay, we have a million ideas, all these things, you know, I'm the kind of person that comes up with a business plan at 2 a.m. for something that's absolutely ridiculous, and I probably shouldn't be doing that. So I learned to really dial back and say, what is a real priority, and what do I need to focus on right now? What is urgent? What is the priority? Do those. So that's my process. Any idea kind of gets filtered through that urgent priority process.
Okay. Yeah, because that's like my issue, right? It's like I'll be up at 2 a.m. I'll write down like 4 or 5 ideas, and I'm like, what am I doing? Like, you're doing one thing right now.
Exactly.
Start to focus your brain.
Yeah.
Roy knows I have a scatter brain too. Like I'll have.
I'm the same way. I have a massive whiteboard at home. There's still not enough room for all the random ideas I have. I'm like, all right, in reality, which of these am I actually going to do? What am I going to actually put effort into? You know, I love being that person, but also know the people I work around and the types of accountability partners. They can't be exactly like you. Right. If you have two people that are the spitting image, you know, one is not needed. So for me, it's creating a team of people or friends who have different ideas, different opinions or perspectives that help you kind of stay on point.
Yeah. I mean, that me and Roy were talking about like starting some type of accountability group, because there are a lot of people that we talk with on a daily basis that, you know, I see them post on social media. They're like, oh, I need an accountability partner. And they just tag their friend. Like, do you want to be my accountability partner? And sometimes I feel like a friend is good, but it's always maybe better to have someone that's not in your closest circle.
For sure. Unbiased and could give you the harsh reality. Like, it's all about the way you communicate too. Like, are you going to bring your person down for not doing what they need to, or are you going to try and help them figure out a strategy to do it? You know? Exactly. So I feel like a system, like an accountability system, would be super cool to have and just keep people on track.
Yeah. I mean, that's the same concept. Like a coach needs a coach too. Like whether it's a sport or just training in general. Like,
dude, I have a coach for my powerlifting stuff. I've always had a coach. You know, I have a degree in exercise science and a bunch of letters behind my name that make me sound fancy, but that doesn't stop me from knowing I need a top-down view. And when I want to go on autopilot, like, I don't want to focus on my stuff. I want to help the people below me, but there's always going to be someone above me who knows more. And I accept that. And I think that's okay.
Yeah, it's definitely okay. Yeah. I mean, that's when you learn, right? Like a lot of people say you don't want to be the smartest person in the room. You want to be the dumbest person in the room.
Exactly. Because you're going to actually learn, you know? Yep. So I support that 100%.
Yeah. And I think it's also like investing, right? Like talking about money and stuff. Like a lot of people don't have a lot of money, but if they want to improve their lifestyle, they want to improve their fitness, they want to improve business, like having some type of coach is what you want to invest your money in. You don't want to go buy a new Apple Watch that's going to tell you to stand up. You're better off spending your money on a coach or someone that's going to keep you accountable.
And that's the hard part, is getting people to understand the difference between, you know, instant gratification, buying that watch, versus buying something that's going to pay its dividends. Return on investment is going to be much greater.
Yeah. How has that experience been for you, like doing Zoom webinars, like compared to in person?
I definitely prefer in person, 100%. You know, there's something different about being in person, having a true connection, like being able to walk around, being able to work the stage, or being able to go into the audience, having true conversations. But this is the next best thing. When you can't have that as an option, this is a great option. Yeah. You know, it's the same reason why concerts will never stop. Yeah. Some people love that in-person experience. You can't really get that from a computer, you know?
Really? Yeah, they said that about like Netflix specials for comedians. Like the comedians are always like, "Oh yeah, it's cool to have access to it at home, but it's never the same as being there in."
Completely different, you know, completely different. There's a component of being human around other humans that will always feel good. So regardless of technology, we're always going to have some sort of inhuman component.
Yeah. I mean, it's going to be interesting to see how it plays out with what's going on now. You know, like how long is it actually going to take to get back to that?
For sure. And it's definitely going to be tough. I think there's going to be more innovations in virtual technology, streaming technology, things like this. But I think people are going to be a little skeptical to get back to the normal life. You know, it's going to be a new normal.
Yeah, absolutely. Awesome. Well, hey, I think we have a few different, we kind of did a game last time we had a conversation. So we're just going to do like a quick little game where we ask you 3 or 4 different questions that are like true or false type thing. And if you want to expand on it, we can expand on it. But Roy has a little something written down, I think, over there.
Couple things.
Yeah.
Cool.
All right. So truth or no? Deadlifts will eventually hurt your back.
That's a hard one to answer because bad deadlifts will hurt your back. Good deadlifts will not hurt your back. So I'll say no. Correct deadlifts will not hurt your back.
Okay. So form over function. Next one. You are your disability.
That is false. That is false as fuck. Yeah, you are only what you decide yourself to be. Disability is a condition, not a person. So don't be a condition.
All right, do one more, Roy.
This is a good one. Everyone has a coming out the closet moment, or should have.
100%. And this is also goes into guys' fears of being considered gay for some reason. Like, oh my God, I don't have a coming out moment. Shut up, man. Like, if you're that scared, you need to rethink like your whole life.
Yeah.
Everyone has a coming out moment where it's like, hey, I have this problem that I've swept under the rug for so long. I need to face it. Whether it's childhood trauma or lack of childhood trauma, not enough hardship, not being tested or being tested too much. Everyone has their glove. Everyone has their mask. Everyone has their hardship or their closet that they need to come out of. The scary part is the people who never come out.
Yeah, that's great. I recall like a moment where I was like starting under a coach and I like portrayed myself as being very, very hard and like my like personality, when in reality I'm actually very sensitive. I'm like kind.
Yeah.
And I had to go through a process of like letting that go, which meant like having conversations with people and exposing myself, and like it was
vulnerability.
It was really weird, this idea of masculinity for me.
Yeah. And that's the thing. Masculinity can be whatever you decide to embody as masculinity. You can be masculine but also have emotions. Masculinity does not mean emotionally depraved.
Roy,
So
What's up?
Who were we talking to? Like, I think it was last week or the week before. We're talking about like how the definition of masculinity seems to be changing a little bit. Or like,
I think Akeem, was it?
Was it Akeem?
Yeah.
Yeah, we're talking about that. How like the idea of masculinity is changing, right? Like, it used to be this idea of like big muscles, strong, standing in front of a woman, and how it's all shifting. And Roy, you can probably add to it a little bit. We're talking more about emotions, like showing your emotions is being more masculine nowadays.
Well, for me, remember that whole imagery, like, where did you get that? You got that from marketers.
Yeah.
You got that from people who created movies and stories and blogs and articles. And your whole image, your whole idea was learned. You learned from marketers that this is what masculine is. When in reality, you can really decide like your level of masculinity, so to speak. It's not a test. You can't fail or pass. Like, it's literally like you are who you are, and you don't need to be labeled with something. Dude, I used to bake cakes. When I was in high school, I don't even know why. I liked the idea of decorating cakes. I thought it was badass. And everyone's like, "Oh, that's kind of gay." I'm like, "Oh, so does my sexual preference change because you're uncomfortable? Is that a derogatory?" I'm really confused at what you're saying. You get what I'm saying?
Yeah.
And if you don't believe that a feminine or gay person who is a black belt can beat your ass, you're going to be very wrong. I have a girlfriend. I'm personally not gay, but I have people in my family who are. And I hate the idea of someone being weak or strong because of how they either identify or what they believe. That's absolutely ridiculous. And that's more of the problem with stigmas and all that affects all minorities,
That's so cool. I mean, just as you said that, I'm like, now that I'm thinking of it, I would say like 99% of what our society is built around those like marketers and advertisers.
Everything is. Oh, dude, it is 100%. What you think is cool is based on what you've seen and what other people say. Yeah. Social media is only accepted because it gives social currency. Social currency is being in the loop. Social currency is having some sort of ego or clout, and it's all technically fabricated. We could go super deep with that, but for real though, like, you're allowed to be whoever you want to be, and it's funny that cake decorating wasn't cool until that cake boss came out and he started making some cool ass cakes, and everyone's like, damn, I want to be a cake baker. I'm like, all of you guys.
I've been doing this for years.
I'm like, I've been on this. Y'all slept on this,
Yeah.
But like, yeah, you're entitled to be however you want to be. And if people think you're a certain way, this is a big one that I'll leave you guys with. Other people's opinions of you are not your responsibility.
I was just going to ask you what you thought about like loving yourself, but also without the fact of not needing somebody else's approval around it.
approval is not needed, you know, like, and approval does nothing for you, like the $20 bill thing. Whether you approve of that $20 bill or not, it still maintains its value.
Yeah.
That's the same thing. Be that $20 bill.
Yeah. I think that the tough part about that for a lot of people is parents, you know, like living up to parents' expectations. And like, you know, it's one thing to be like who you are in front of your peers. But I think when it comes to like parents pressuring you to go to school to do something that you don't really want to do, but you feel like you have to because they want you to do something, like that, I think is a tough part for a lot of people.
I think it's really tough. And the bad thing is it still applies. That's an external circumstance that you can't control.
Yeah.
And sometimes, well, all the time, you can't decide who your parents are. My parents weren't rich. You know, I could be upset all day that I didn't have a rich life, you know, that I didn't have all the stuff that we had to go to church to get food and stuff like that. I could be mad. What's that going to do for you? If your parents don't accept what you want out of life, I'm sorry, but that's what it is, you know, and you have to decide, are you going to live for someone else's expectations, or are you going to be another statistic that proves expectations lead to disappointments?
Yeah. And I found that it's actually, it's not usually that your parents don't approve of you. It's that you don't approve that your parents will never be any different or to have a different thought of you. So
100%.
if you get to that point where you can just let them be who they are, and you will have more space to just be yourself.
For sure. And that's the hard part, is deciding to be yourself with all these other societal contributors, family contributors, you know, these ideas of what you're supposed to be. You have to let go of the idea of what you're supposed to be and like accept the idea of what you want to be and what you're willing to work for. Your priorities are not what you say they are. Your priorities are what you do. So if you decide that other people's expectations of you are more important than your own expectation of yourself, that's going to be your life. Just know you're responsible for that.
Right.
Couldn't agree more. Well, hey, Chris, that was like the fastest hour I've ever talked to someone.
That was a great talk, man. I really love that. That was solid.
That was really amazing. Just let everyone know before you leave where they could find you, what you're up to, where they could buy your products, you know, the bars and everything.
Cool. Yeah, so everything is at Chris Ruden, YouTube, Instagram. My website's chrisruden.com. So I do keynotes all around the country. If you're interested in having me, just reach out. Also co-owner of NRG Bites. So it's nrg-bite.com. And we have some awesome protein bars. So if you're interested in checking them out, let me know. If you guys need anything, feel free to DM me. I'm not one of those weird guys who don't write back. I write back to everyone. Yeah. I really appreciate the time with you guys. Thank you for doing what you're doing and giving back.
Yeah,
thank you, man. This is
Thanks.
great.
Yeah, this is amazing. Yeah, so we'll be in touch. Once we get it all set up, we'll email you links to it so you can take a listen, post if you want. And yeah, man, love it. Following and keep killing it. All right, man. Take care. All right.
Thanks, Chris.